Saturday, 7:30 Eastern Time, one of the biggest games of the college football season up to this point, will take place. It's number 2 Ohio State against number 3 Oregon from Eugene. Ohio State is a slight road favorite right now. The total is hovering just north of 52 and a half, 53, right around there. It's kind of bouncing all over the place. Big time showdown, a historically significant game here, not just because these two teams are now in the Big Ten, but because, man, top 5 teams have not come to Autzen Stadium in quite a while. It's been since 2016. So this is going to be awesome to check this one out. And the second we found out that Oregon was heading into the Big Ten, this was the matchup you dreamed of, right? Oregon has long felt like the Ohio State of the Pac-12. Some people will say SC, fair enough. But Oregon, with their NIL support, with their resources, with the amount of big guys that they can recruit along the offensive and defensive line, plus the skill that they've been able to recruit for a really long time as well, at least in the modern era, Oregon has felt like a cut above anything we've seen from the Trojans, at least the last 7-8 years. Ohio State is the standard when it comes to Big Ten football, even though they've lost the last 3 to Michigan. Over the course of time, Ohio State has been the best program in the Big Ten. Let's dive into the matchups on the field that might determine the outcome. Number 1, will Ohio State continue to dominate in the trenches? When you look at Ohio State and how the offensive line has played, let's just call it what it is. Ohio State, the last couple of years along the offensive line, hasn't been great. It's been their Achilles heel. It's been the weakest part of their team. But it appears, granted, albeit the first few weeks against less than stellar competition, it appears like that group has taken a considerable step. Now, Iowa is who they played last week. Iowa came into the game against the Buckeyes with the number 4 rush defense in the country. They were allowing just 62 yards per game, and no team had rushed for more than 100 or a touchdown against them. Well, in comes Ohio State. They go up, they have 42 rushing yards in the first quarter alone, and they cap off the day with 200-plus rushing yards. And they got in the end zone on the ground as well. Only 4 different offenses have averaged more than 5 yards per carry against the Hawkeyes since 2018. Ohio State just joined that list. Now, Oregon, they've seen good rushing attacks before, but I don't know if they've seen one quite like this. The 1-2 punch that you're going to get from Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson is an awful lot to handle. Couple that with the quarterback run game, which we'll talk about here in a minute, that Howard has kind of contributed to this offense, and it becomes very dicey. But Oregon has seen a super capable back in Ashton Jeanty. Oregon played Boise State. Now, if you look at what Ashton Jeanty did against the Ducks, he went for a $192 and 3 touchdowns. But that seems to be the outlier performance for Oregon's defense, because Oregon has held 3 opponents to under 60 total yards rushing this year. And while 131 were allowed on the ground against Oregon State, only 15 came in the second half. So they made some adjustments and things seemingly started to go in the right direction. So Ohio State's offensive line and run game, is that what makes them different? Question 2, who will win in the red zone? Because this was also a huge problem for Ohio State last year. They were actually number 57 in the country last year in red zone efficiency. Well, this year, not only are they better, they are unrecognizably improved. There, as the field starts to condense, they are number 1 right now in red zone efficiency. They have scored on all 21 red zone penetrations, and remarkably, of those 21 scores, 20 were touchdowns. It's absurd. You got 12 rushing touchdowns, 8 passing touchdowns, and 1 field goal. Now, quarterback run has been really helpful in this part of the field. When the field condenses and the numbers get a little bit dicier, it's nice to know that Will Howard, who at 235 pounds is a very effective runner, a physical runner, and has 4 rushing touchdowns on the season, all of which are when the field gets super condensed. Now, Oregon, on the other hand, their offense has not been quite as clean in the red zone. Gabriel, their quarterback, Dylan Gabriel, hasn't made a lot of great decisions. Through the first 3 games, things were looking pretty good. Well, the last couple weeks, not so much. He has 3 red zone interceptions the last couple weeks. So his decision making when things have gotten a little tighter has not been quite as good. Now, while Oregon's offense, when they haven't made mistakes, opposing defenses really haven't been able to stop them. So the only other red zone appearance without points came when they played against UCLA, and that's because the Ducks took a knee in the red zone. So Oregon's got to clean things up a little bit based on the last couple of weeks, but for the most part, they can look in the mirror and say, yeah, we've kind of stopped ourselves with some bad decisions. Question 3, can either team contain the top weapons? Because these teams, there's just weapons all over the field. It's like, there's a first rounder. Well, who do I throw to? The guy that's going to be drafted number 3 overall, or the guy that could be drafted number 1 overall in a couple years? Like, it's absurd how deep these rosters are with talent and weapons. For Oregon, a guy that just doesn't get enough love, even dating back to last year, he just is constant production. He just never, ever, ever goes into a game and disappears. Every week you expect to see Tez Johnson high on the targets, high on the receptions, high on the production, and that's been the case this year as well. Gabriel has targeted Johnson way more than just about anybody else, especially since the bye week. Gabriel's attempted 73 passes in the last couple weeks. 28 of those 73 have gone in the direction of Tez Johnson. The next closest, as far as targeted receivers, has 11. So it's 2.5, 2.7 to 1 when looking at the target share that Tez Johnson has. So it's going to be of the utmost importance for the super talented Ohio State secondary to bracket Tez Johnson and not allow him to get a lot of space. On the other side, Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka. Incredible weapons. Now, Jeremiah Smith, he's been every bit as advertised, super impactful. The guy has great length. He makes a freak show type of catch almost every single week. You watch the highlights, you're just absolutely out of your mind. Has created a ton of big plays, has found the red zone, has found the end zone multiple times. The guy just every week is just more impressive than he was the week before, but people have seemingly forgot about Emeka Egbuka. Emeka Egbuka is as reliable and as talented and as good of a route runner as far as creating sudden separation as you'll find in the Big Ten. Now, while he's overshadowed because of the highlight reel that we see from Jeremiah Smith every week, do not lose sight of how impactful Emeka Egbuka can be, especially when lined up in the slot. A couple trends in the game. Oregon is 1-4 against the spread in their last 5 as an underdog. Oregon is also 0-3 against the spread at home this season. I look at this game and I think Ohio State's going to flex. I'm not sold right now on Oregon's offensive or defensive line. I think Oregon has a couple of really good pass rushers, but I don't know if those pass rushers are going to get a lot of obvious passing situations because of how effective I anticipate the Ohio State run game being. I think Ohio State has a vastly superior roster and will pound the football. I like the Buckeyes to win this game convincingly on the road and reminding everyone that they are still the king in the Big Ten, regardless of how many teams have now entered the fold.